Know how to listen, and you will profit even from those who talk badly. Words lose their force the moment they are used without precision. Every unnecessary sentence weakens the mind behind it. Every careless reaction reveals a lack of control. The person who speaks without restraint exposes everything at once: their emotions, their insecurities, their need to be seen. Silence, on the other hand, conceals, sharpens, and strengthens. It creates space, it creates weight, it creates authority. The Stoic understands this without needing to announce it. While others rush to respond, to prove, to defend, the Stoic remains still, watching, listening, measuring. This restraint is not hesitation, it is discipline. It is control over impulse, control over ego, control over the urge to be heard at all costs. In that control, something begins to form, a presence that does not demand attention, yet commands it. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, wrote Marcus Aurelius. There is no noise in that statement, no need for explanation, no desire for validation. It stands on its own because it comes from a place of internal certainty. The Stoic does not chase agreement. The Stoic builds substance, and substance does not need constant expression. Most people speak to fill space. They talk to avoid discomfort, to escape silence, to feel relevant in a world that measures visibility as value. They reveal too much, too quickly, and in doing so, they give away their position before they even understand it themselves. The Stoic moves differently. Silence becomes a filter. It removes what is unnecessary. It leaves only what is essential. Epictetus taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This is not a suggestion, it is a standard. The Stoic listens not only to others, but to their own thoughts before allowing them to take form as words. This pause creates clarity. It separates reaction from intention. It transforms speech from impulse into decision. In silence, observation sharpens. Patterns reveal themselves. Motives become visible. The Stoic sees what others miss because they are not distracted by the need to respond. While others are preparing their next sentence, the Stoic is gathering information, understanding the terrain, and choosing the exact moment to act. Silence becomes an advantage. There is a reason authority rarely speaks without purpose. Words carry consequence. The more they are used, the less they weigh. The Stoic protects that weight. Each sentence is deliberate. Each statement is measured. When the Stoic speaks, it is not to impress. It is to move, to direct, to clarify. And because silence has been maintained, the impact is undeniable. Be mostly silent or speak merely what is necessary and in few words, Epictetus reminds. This is not about withdrawal, it is about mastery. The Stoic does not fear silence. The Stoic uses it. Silence becomes a form of discipline that shapes the mind, strengthens perception, and builds a presence that cannot be ignored. In a world driven by constant expression, silence stands out. It signals control in an environment of reaction. It signals strength in a culture of exposure. It forces others to reveal themselves while the Stoic remains composed, steady, and unreadable. This is not passivity. This is positioning. This lecture will show you how silence becomes power, how restraint builds authority, how observation creates advantage, and how disciplined speech transforms the way others perceive and respond to you. You will see how the Stoic uses silence to control emotion, sharpen awareness, and command presence without force. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The discipline of observation. The Stoic learns to watch before acting, and in that stillness, a different kind of strength begins to take shape. A strength that does not announce itself, and does not need to be recognized to exist. Silence becomes a tool for gathering truth, reading people, and understanding what is not being said. And this tool is sharpened every time the impulse to react is held back for a moment longer. The room reveals more when the mind is not rushing to fill it, and the smallest details begin to stand out with unusual clarity. A glance that lingers too long, a tone that shifts without warning, a pause that carries weight. These are signals that most people overlook because they are already preparing their response. The Stoic does not prepare a response first. The Stoic prepares to see, and in that preparation, the entire field of perception widens. There is no urgency to speak, and without that urgency, the mind becomes steady enough to notice what would otherwise remain hidden. This is where silence begins to take form as power, quiet, contained, and precise. The first movement is always observation, and it happens before any word is formed, before any judgment takes shape, before any action is set into motion. The Stoic studies the moment with patience, allowing it to unfold without interference, and this patience becomes a form of discipline that most never develop. What is being said is only one layer, and beneath it there are intentions, emotions, and contradictions that reveal themselves slowly to a mind that is willing to wait. Most people move too quickly to notice these layers, and in their speed they lose accuracy, reacting to fragments instead of the whole. The Stoic slows down deliberately, creating space between stimulus and response, and within that space, the truth has time to surface. The mind is not dragged by every word or gesture. It remains centered, anchored, and attentive. Observation becomes a deliberate act, guided by restraint and sharpened by silence. Observation is not passive. It requires effort, and that effort is directed inward as much as it is outward. The Stoic separates perception from assumption, refusing to accept the first interpretation that appears, knowing that the first interpretation is often shaped by bias, habit, or emotion. Each thought is examined before it is trusted. Each impression is questioned before it is accepted, and through this process, the mind becomes less vulnerable to error. The Stoic does not rush to define the situation, because definition fixes perception too early and limits understanding. Instead, the moment is allowed to breathe, and in that breathing space, the layers begin to reveal themselves one by one. Attention is directed with care, moving across details that others would dismiss, and this attention gathers information that cannot be accessed through haste. Silence supports this process by removing the pressure to respond, allowing the mind to remain open and observant. Clarity begins to form when observation is sustained, and this clarity is different from quick conclusions that feel certain but lack depth. The Stoic becomes less reactive and more precise because every action is grounded in a fuller understanding of the situation. External stimuli lose their power to provoke immediate reaction because the mind is no longer conditioned to respond without examination. Instead of being pulled in different directions by every change in the environment, the Stoic remains centered, evaluating, measuring, and understanding before acting. This creates a quiet advantage, one that is rarely noticed by others until its effects begin to appear. While others act on incomplete information, the Stoic waits, and in that waiting there is control. The moment is not lost, it is studied, and through study it becomes clear. The discipline of observation also turns inward, and this is where the Stoic begins to understand the origin of disturbance. Events themselves carry no inherent command over the mind, and it is the interpretation that gives them power. As Epictetus reminds with precision, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. This understanding shifts attention from the external to the internal, where perception is formed and meaning is assigned. The Stoic watches thoughts as they arise, noticing how quickly the mind attempts to label, judge, and react. By observing these patterns, the Stoic gains distance from them, and in that distance there is freedom to choose a different response. Silence supports this inward observation, creating the space needed to see thoughts clearly without being carried away by them. The mind becomes less reactive and more deliberate, shaped by awareness instead of impulse. There is a refinement that takes place when observation is practiced consistently, and it reshapes how reality is experienced. The Stoic begins to see that perception is not fixed. It is influenced by preparation, expectation, and internal condition, which is why it is said with clarity that people only see what they are prepared to see, as Ralph Waldo Emerson observed. This recognition changes how the Stoic approaches every situation, knowing that what is seen is filtered through the mind that sees it. Preparation becomes internal, focused on clearing bias and sharpening awareness so that perception becomes more accurate. The Stoic trains the mind to remain open, to receive information without immediate judgment, and to allow understanding to develop fully. Silence becomes the condition that makes this possible, removing the noise that distorts perception and replacing it with stillness that clarifies it. In this stillness, reality appears with greater precision. The inward condition of the mind begins to influence the outward experience, and this relationship becomes clear through careful observation. The Stoic recognizes that what is cultivated internally shapes how the external world is perceived and engaged with, a principle that Plutarch expressed when he wrote, "What we achieve inwardly will change outer reality." This is not abstract. It is observable in every moment, in how the same situation can appear different depending on the state of the mind. A restless mind finds conflict quickly, while a steady mind sees structure and possibility within the same conditions. The Stoic works on the internal first, refining perception, strengthening attention, and stabilizing thought. Silence supports this process by creating the environment where internal work can take place without distraction. As the inner condition becomes more disciplined, the outer world appears less chaotic and more understandable. Reason becomes the guide within this discipline, and it separates the Stoic from patterns of reaction that are driven by instinct or habit. There is a clear hierarchy in how people respond to life, captured in the observation that the wise are instructed by reason, average minds by experience, the stupid by necessity, and the brute by instinct. As Cicero stated with clarity, the Stoic chooses reason deliberately, using it to interpret what is observed and to guide action with precision. This requires slowing down enough to allow reason to engage, which cannot happen in a state of constant reaction. Observation provides the information, and reason organizes that information into understanding. The combination of these two creates a foundation that is stable and reliable. Silence allows both to function without interference, giving the mind the space it needs to operate at its highest level. Self-knowledge deepens this process, because the Stoic understands that observation of the external must be matched by observation of the internal. The patterns of thought, the tendencies towards certain reactions, the subtle biases that influence perception, all must be seen clearly. This is where the insight that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, as Aristotle expressed, becomes practical and immediate. The Stoic turns attention inward with the same discipline used to observe the external world, studying the mind with patience and precision. This inward observation reveals the roots of behavior, allowing them to be understood and refined. Silence creates the conditions for this introspection, removing external distractions and allowing focus to settle on the self. Through this process, the Stoic becomes less controlled by hidden patterns and more guided by conscious understanding. As observation becomes more refined, the Stoic begins to recognize how much is missed when attention is scattered or rushed. The smallest details carry meaning, and those details accumulate into a clearer picture of reality. The Stoic watches how people speak, how they pause, how their expressions shift, and how their actions align or conflict with their words. These observations are not used to judge quickly, they are used to understand deeply. Silence allows this understanding to develop without interruption, creating a continuous flow of perception that is not broken by unnecessary speech. The mind becomes attuned to subtleties, and these subtleties provide insight that cannot be gained through direct questioning or confrontation. Observation becomes a quiet form of intelligence, operating without drawing attention to itself. There is also a restraint that develops alongside observation, and it prevents the Stoic from acting prematurely on incomplete understanding. The urge to respond is still present, but it is no longer dominant because it is recognized as an impulse rather than a command. The Stoic feels the urge and allows it to pass, returning attention to the act of observing. This creates a steady rhythm where perception leads and action follows, instead of the other way around. Silence supports this rhythm by removing the expectation of immediate response, allowing time to be used for understanding instead. The Stoic becomes less hurried and more deliberate, and this shift changes the quality of every interaction. The moment is no longer something to react to, it becomes something to study. As this discipline continues, the Stoic develops a presence that is difficult to define but easy to recognize. There is a calm in the way attention is directed, a steadiness in the way situations are approached, and a clarity in the way decisions are made. This presence is built through countless moments of choosing observation over reaction, silence over unnecessary speech, and understanding over assumption. Others may not recognize the process, but they recognize the result, a composure that remains intact under pressure. The Stoic does not need to assert control, because control is already established internally. This internal control shapes external behavior, creating consistency that builds trust and authority. Silence becomes the foundation of this presence, supporting it without being visible. The discipline of observation also protects the Stoic from manipulation because it reduces the likelihood of being influenced by incomplete or misleading information. By waiting, by watching, and by allowing the full picture to emerge, the Stoic avoids being drawn into reactions that serve someone else's agenda. The mind remains independent, guided by reason, and supported by careful observation. This independence is strengthened every time the Stoic chooses to observe instead of react, reinforcing the habit of patience and clarity. Silence plays a critical role here, preventing the premature expression of thoughts that have not yet been fully formed. The Stoic maintains control over what is revealed and when, ensuring that speech is always aligned with understanding. This creates a position of strength that is both stable and adaptable. Through all of this, the Stoic begins to see that observation is not simply a skill, it is a way of engaging with the world that transforms experience at every level. The mind becomes more precise, more aware, and more capable of navigating complexity without being overwhelmed. Each moment becomes an opportunity to refine perception, to deepen understanding, and to strengthen control. Silence supports this transformation continuously, providing the space needed for observation to function fully. The Stoic does not seek to escape the world. They seek to understand it, and observation is the path that leads to that understanding. The more it is practiced, the more natural it becomes, until it shapes every interaction and every decision. The mind remains steady, attentive, and ready to see clearly in any situation. Chapter 2. Don't rush to defend. Pressure arrives without warning, often disguised as criticism, accusation, or misunderstanding, and in that moment the instinct to respond rises quickly, demanding to be expressed. The Stoic feels this impulse as clearly as anyone, yet does not obey it without question, allowing it to pass through awareness without taking control of action. There is a pause that forms, subtle yet deliberate, and within that pause the entire situation begins to slow down. Words that once felt urgent lose their intensity, and the need to defend begins to reveal itself as a reaction rather than a necessity. Silence becomes the space where clarity starts to take shape, separating what must be addressed from what can be left untouched. The Stoic stands within that space without urgency, allowing the moment to unfold without interference. In this restraint, power begins to take form quietly and without force. The mind is trained to respond quickly, conditioned by habit, and reinforced by the need to be understood, to be correct, to be seen as capable. This conditioning pushes a person to defend themselves at the first sign of challenge, creating a pattern that repeats without awareness. The Stoic interrupts this pattern, recognizing that immediate response often serves emotion more than truth. A statement is heard, yet instead of reacting, it is observed, examined, and allowed to settle. The emotional surge that follows criticism begins to fade when it is not fed by speech or movement. Silence becomes a stabilizing force, holding the mind steady while others move into reaction. In that stillness, the Stoic retains control over what is revealed and what is withheld. This control changes the entire dynamic of the interaction. To defend too quickly is to expose uncertainty, because urgency in speech often reflects instability in thought. The Stoic understands that composure communicates more than words, and that remaining still under pressure carries a quiet authority that cannot be replicated through argument. When others escalate, their words begin to lose structure, and their intent becomes easier to read. The Stoic does not interrupt this process, allowing it to unfold fully, observing rather than engaging prematurely. There is no need to match intensity, no need to correct every point, and no need to respond to every claim. Silence filters the situation, removing what is unnecessary and leaving only what matters. This filtering creates clarity, and clarity supports precision when speech is eventually used. The moment is not lost through silence, it is refined. There are many situations where response is not required at all, and recognizing these moments requires discipline. The Stoic evaluates the intention behind the words, the state of the person speaking, and the potential outcome of engagement. If reason is absent, then argument has no foundation, and entering such an exchange only disperses energy without producing clarity. The Stoic allows these moments to pass without interference, preserving focus and maintaining internal stability. Silence becomes a form of discernment, separating valuable engagement from empty conflict. In doing so, the Stoic avoids being drawn into patterns that lead nowhere. The absence of response becomes a deliberate act, not avoidance, but control. This control strengthens with each moment it is practiced. The ability to hold a thought without reacting to it is a form of intellectual strength, one that develops through repeated restraint. It is expressed clearly in the understanding that it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it, as Aristotle observed with precision. The Stoic applies this not only to ideas, but to accusations, criticisms, and opposing views. A statement can be heard fully without being accepted, and it can be examined without being defended against immediately. This creates a space where understanding can develop without distortion. The Stoic remains open to information while remaining grounded in judgment. Silence supports this openness by removing the pressure to respond before clarity is reached. The mind becomes more flexible and more stable at the same time. When arguments lose direction, they often shift into something less structured, and this shift reveals more about the speaker than the subject itself. The Stoic observes this transition carefully, recognizing that when clarity fades, intensity often increases. This pattern is captured in the observation that when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser, as Socrates expressed with directness. The Stoic does not engage with slander because it does not operate within reason, and responding to it only extends its presence. Silence ends the cycle by removing the reaction it depends on. The situation resolves itself when it is not sustained by engagement. The Stoic remains steady, allowing the moment to pass without becoming entangled in it. This steadiness preserves both clarity and position. Silence is not empty in these moments. It carries intention and control, and it shapes how the interaction unfolds. The Stoic uses silence to observe tone, pace, and emotional shifts, gathering information that cannot be accessed through speech. This attention reveals inconsistencies, intentions, and underlying motives that would remain hidden if the focus were on responding. The moment becomes clearer as it is allowed to develop without interruption. The Stoic does not rush to fill the space, and in that absence of noise, understanding deepens. It becomes evident that silence is not a lack of action. It is a form of action that operates without drawing attention to itself. This form of action preserves energy and increases accuracy. The result is a response that is measured, precise, and effective. There is also a discipline in choosing when to speak, and this discipline is strengthened by silence. The Stoic understands that timing affects the weight of words, and that words delivered too early often lose their impact. Waiting allows the moment to settle, allowing the necessary response to become clear. This restraint aligns with the understanding that it is a good thing to learn to be silent, as Plutarch stated with simplicity. Silence is learned through practice, through repeated moments of choosing observation over reaction. Each time it is chosen, it becomes more natural and more effective. The Stoic develops a rhythm where silence leads and speech follows. This rhythm creates consistency and control in every interaction. Speech, when it comes, is guided by intention rather than impulse, and this intention is formed during the period of observation. The Stoic does not speak to relieve tension or to assert dominance, but to clarify, to direct, or to resolve when necessary. Words are selected carefully, and they are delivered without strain or urgency. This measured approach reflects the understanding that I begin to speak only when I am certain what I will say is not better left unsaid, as Cato the Younger demonstrated through his conduct. The Stoic holds this standard internally, ensuring that speech adds value rather than noise. Silence creates the conditions for this standard to be upheld consistently. The result is communication that is concise, clear, and grounded. There are moments when others persist in their position despite clear reasoning, and in these moments the Stoic recognizes that continuation serves no purpose. Engaging further only prolongs the exchange without improving understanding. The Stoic steps back internally, allowing the conversation to end without force or frustration. This restraint aligns with the insight that any man can make mistakes, but only an idiot persists in his error, as Cicero observed with clarity. The Stoic does not take responsibility for correcting every error, nor do they measure success by winning arguments. The focus remains on maintaining clarity and composure. Silence closes the exchange without conflict. The Stoic moves forward without carrying unnecessary tension. Emotional escalation often follows prolonged defense, and this escalation reduces the quality of both thought and speech. The Stoic avoids this pattern by refusing to engage at the level of rising intensity. Instead, the mind remains steady and the body remains composed, preventing the situation from gaining momentum. There is an understanding that excessive reaction often harms the one who reacts, an idea captured in the warning that "Heat not a furnace for your foe, so hot that it do singe yourself," as William Shakespeare expressed with vivid clarity. The Stoic applies this by maintaining balance, avoiding the internal damage that comes from uncontrolled response. Silence acts as a barrier, preventing escalation from taking hold. This preserves both clarity and strength within the moment. Over time, this discipline reshapes how the Stoic experiences conflict, turning what was once reactive into something measured and controlled. The urge to defend becomes less dominant, and the ability to observe becomes more natural. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice restraint, to refine perception, and to strengthen control over impulse. Silence remains at the center of this process, supporting it continuously without needing to be recognized. The Stoic develops a presence that is stable, composed, and difficult to disrupt. This presence influences interactions without force, guiding them toward clarity and away from unnecessary conflict. Words are used sparingly, and when they are used, they carry intention. The mind remains steady, prepared to observe before it acts. There is a quiet confidence that emerges from this discipline, one that does not depend on validation or agreement. The Stoic does not feel the need to defend every position because understanding is not tied to external approval. This independence allows for greater focus on observation and less concern with perception. Silence reinforces this independence by reducing the need for constant expression. The Stoic becomes more self-contained, relying on internal clarity rather than external affirmation. This shift changes how interactions are approached, reducing tension and increasing control. The mind remains centered and the moment remains clear. Observation continues without interruption. As this practice continues, the Stoic becomes more attuned to the patterns that drive others into reaction, and this awareness deepens understanding. The cycle of accusation, defense, escalation, and conflict becomes visible, and with visibility comes the ability to step outside of it. The Stoic does not participate in the cycle, choosing instead to remain steady and observant. Silence interrupts the pattern by removing the expected response, creating a shift in the interaction. This shift often leads to resolution without conflict, as the momentum of escalation is broken. The Stoic maintains position without force, relying on composure rather than argument. The moment resolves itself with minimal resistance. There is also a refinement in how the Stoic uses speech after observation, ensuring that words align with understanding and purpose. Speech becomes an extension of clarity rather than a reaction to pressure. The Stoic waits until the moment is ready, until the necessary words are clear, and until the response can be delivered without strain. This approach preserves the weight of speech, ensuring that it is not diluted through overuse. Silence supports this by maintaining space between thought and expression. The Stoic does not feel compelled to fill that space, allowing it to exist as part of the interaction. This creates a balance between silence and speech that strengthens both. The discipline of not rushing to defend transforms the way the Stoic engages with the world, shifting from reaction to control, from impulse to awareness. Each moment becomes an opportunity to observe, to understand, and to respond with precision when necessary. Silence remains the foundation of this transformation, providing the space needed for clarity to develop. The Stoic continues to refine this discipline, allowing it to shape behavior, perception, and interaction in a consistent and deliberate way. The mind remains steady, the body remains composed, and the moment remains clear enough to be understood fully. Chapter 3: The Strength of Not Proving Yourself. The urge to prove rises quickly, often before the mind has had time to examine the moment, and it carries with it a quiet tension that seeks release through speech. The Stoic recognizes this tension and does not rush to resolve it, allowing it to exist without immediate expression. In that restraint, something begins to settle, and the need to convince others loses its urgency. The mind shifts from reaction to observation, from assertion to understanding, and in that shift, a different kind of strength becomes visible. Silence holds the moment in place, preventing it from scattering into unnecessary argument. The Stoic stands within that stillness without needing to assert position, allowing presence to carry meaning without force. This is where silence begins to take shape as power, grounded, steady, and unmoved by the demand to prove. The desire to be right is deeply rooted, and it often disguises itself as clarity or conviction, yet it reveals itself through urgency and insistence. The Stoic does not reject conviction, but examines the impulse that drives it, asking whether it is guided by reason or by the need for validation. When the need for validation is seen clearly, it begins to lose its influence, and speech becomes less reactive and more deliberate. The moment no longer feels like a contest that must be won, and the pressure to respond begins to dissolve. Silence creates space where this transformation can occur, allowing the mind to step back from the instinct to prove. In that space, the Stoic gains control over what is expressed and what is withheld. The result is a presence that does not seek approval, yet remains steady and grounded in its position. There are situations where others push for engagement, where words are used to provoke, challenge, or draw the Stoic into a contest of ideas. The Stoic does not enter this space without purpose, recognizing that not every exchange leads to understanding. When reason is absent, argument becomes repetitive, and clarity gives way to persistence without progress. The Stoic observes this pattern and chooses restraint, allowing the exchange to end without escalation. Silence becomes a boundary that protects clarity from being diluted by unnecessary debate. The absence of response often reveals more than continued engagement, allowing the nature of the interaction to become visible. The Stoic remains composed, grounded in awareness rather than driven by reaction. This composure holds its own weight without needing reinforcement. The ability to remain grounded in the presence of disagreement is a form of discipline that develops over time, shaped by repeated moments of restraint. Each time the Stoic chooses not to engage in unnecessary argument, the mind becomes more stable and less dependent on external validation. The need to prove begins to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence that does not require constant expression. This confidence is not built through victory in debate, but through control over impulse and clarity of thought. Silence supports this development by reducing the noise that often surrounds disagreement, allowing the mind to remain focused and steady. The Stoic does not withdraw from interaction, but engages with intention rather than compulsion. In doing so, speech becomes purposeful and measured. When words are used sparingly, they carry more weight, and this weight is felt immediately when the Stoic chooses to speak. The absence of constant explanation creates a contrast that sharpens the impact of each statement. The Stoic understands that influence does not come from the quantity of words, but from their precision and timing. Silence prepares the ground for this precision, allowing thoughts to form clearly before they are expressed. The moment of speech becomes deliberate, free from urgency and shaped by understanding. This approach transforms communication into something controlled and effective, rather than reactive and scattered. The Stoic speaks when it matters, and remains silent when it does not. This balance strengthens both silence and speech. There is a subtle authority that emerges when the Stoic refuses to be drawn into competition, an authority that does not need to assert itself to be recognized. Others may attempt to escalate, to increase volume, to accelerate speech in an effort to dominate the exchange, yet the Stoic does not follow this pattern. The pace remains steady, the tone remains controlled, and the mind remains focused on clarity rather than dominance. This steadiness becomes visible, and it alters the dynamic of the interaction. The Stoic does not match intensity, but absorbs it without losing balance. Silence reinforces this balance, preventing the situation from becoming chaotic. The result is a presence that remains intact, regardless of external pressure. There are moments when a few words are sufficient to settle what extended debate could not, and these words carry their weight because they are supported by silence. The Stoic understands that speech gains strength when it is not overused, and that restraint enhances clarity. A statement delivered calmly without strain or urgency often reaches further than a series of arguments delivered in haste. Silence surrounds these words, giving them space to resonate without being diluted. The Stoic does not repeat unnecessarily, does not chase agreement, and does not attempt to overpower resistance. Instead, the words are allowed to stand on their own, supported by composure and clarity. This approach reduces conflict and preserves focus. The interaction becomes more precise and less reactive. In situations where the other person refuses to move, where disagreement persists without openness to reason, the Stoic recognizes the limits of engagement. Continuing to argue in such conditions only drains clarity and weakens position, creating a cycle that leads nowhere. The Stoic steps back internally, allowing the exchange to end without force. Silence becomes a form of disengagement that preserves both energy and composure. The need to prove dissolves when the outcome is understood to be unaffected by continued effort. The Stoic does not measure success by changing another person's position, but by maintaining clarity and control within their own mind. This shift in focus strengthens independence and reduces unnecessary conflict. The moment is allowed to pass without resistance. Calm, collected, and controlled communication carries a distinct authority, one that is recognized quickly even when it is not acknowledged directly. The Stoic does not rush speech, does not increase volume, and does not attempt to match the speed of others. Instead, words are chosen carefully, delivered steadily, and allowed to stand without excess. This measured approach signals control, and control shapes perception in a way that cannot be replicated through force. Silence reinforces this perception by creating contrast, highlighting the difference between reaction and restraint. The Stoic remains composed, allowing the interaction to unfold without losing balance. This composure becomes a form of influence that operates without visible effort. It is recognized through presence rather than declaration. There is also a refinement that occurs when the Stoic begins to observe the internal reactions that arise during disagreement. The impulse to interrupt, to correct, to assert, all become visible when they are not acted upon immediately. By observing these impulses, the Stoic gains distance from them, allowing choice to replace reaction. Silence provides the space needed for this observation, creating a separation between thought and action. This separation allows the Stoic to respond with clarity rather than reflex. Over time, the impulses lose their intensity and the mind becomes less reactive. The Stoic develops a steady awareness that remains present even in moments of pressure. This awareness supports consistent control over speech and behavior. Presence often outweighs persuasion, and the Stoic understands this through experience rather than theory. A composed posture, a steady gaze, and a controlled tone communicate more than extended explanation. These elements are supported by silence, which allows them to stand without distraction. The Stoic does not rely on persuasion to establish position, but on clarity and consistency of behavior. This approach reduces the need for argument, as the message is conveyed through action as much as through words. Silence becomes an extension of this message, reinforcing it without adding complexity. The interaction becomes simpler and more focused. The Stoic remains grounded, allowing understanding to develop naturally. There is a discipline in allowing others to reveal themselves through their own excess, and this discipline requires patience and restraint. When someone speaks excessively, contradicts themselves, or escalates without direction, these patterns become visible when they are not interrupted. The Stoic observes these patterns without interference, allowing them to unfold fully. Silence acts as a mirror, reflecting the behavior back without distortion. This reflection often clarifies the situation more effectively than direct correction. The Stoic does not rush to point out inconsistencies, trusting that they will become apparent through observation. This trust reduces the need for intervention. The moment becomes self-explanatory when it is allowed to develop without interruption. As this practice continues, the Stoic becomes less concerned with being perceived as right and more focused on maintaining internal clarity. The need to prove fades as understanding deepens, and the mind becomes more stable in its position. Silence supports this stability by reducing the pressure to constantly express or defend. The Stoic becomes more self-contained, relying on internal certainty rather than external validation. This shift changes the quality of interaction, making it less reactive and more deliberate. Words are used when they add value and withheld when they do not. The balance between silence and speech becomes more refined. The Stoic moves through interactions with greater control and less friction. There is also an awareness that excessive defense often reveals more than it protects, exposing uncertainty and creating openings for further challenge. The Stoic recognizes this and avoids unnecessary exposure by maintaining restraint. Silence acts as a shield, protecting clarity from being diluted by over-explanation. The Stoic does not feel the need to justify every position, understanding that clarity does not require constant reinforcement. This understanding reduces the need for defensive speech. The mind remains steady, and the interaction remains controlled. The Stoic holds position without strain, allowing the moment to pass without disturbance. Through all of this, the Stoic develops a deeper understanding of how silence shapes interaction, turning what once felt like a weakness into a source of strength. The absence of constant defense creates space for observation, for clarity, and for measured response. Each moment of restraint reinforces this pattern, strengthening control over impulse and refining communication. Silence remains at the center, supporting every aspect of this development without needing recognition. The Stoic continues to engage with the world, yet does so with greater precision and less unnecessary effort. The need to prove fades into the background, replaced by a steady awareness that does not depend on external validation. The mind remains clear, attentive, and grounded in its own understanding. Chapter 4: The Mastery of Emotional Restraint. Frustration rises quickly, often from the smallest disruptions, and it seeks expression through tone, through movement, through subtle shifts that reveal more than words ever could. The Stoic notices this rise without immediately reacting to it, allowing the feeling to exist without granting it control. There is a pause that forms between the sensation and the response, and within that pause, the entire experience begins to change. What once felt like an automatic reaction becomes something observable, something that can be studied rather than obeyed. Silence becomes the space where this observation takes place, holding the moment steady long enough for awareness to emerge. The Stoic remains within that stillness, watching the feeling move without being carried by it. In that observation, control begins to take shape quietly. The smallest moments often reveal the greatest weaknesses because they are rarely guarded with the same attention as larger challenges. A delayed response, a minor inconvenience, a disruption that interrupts expectation. These are the moments where frustration appears without warning. The Stoic does not dismiss these moments as insignificant, understanding that they are opportunities to observe the condition of the mind. When irritation appears, it is not pushed away or expressed outwardly, it is examined with precision. The tone is held steady, the expression remains composed, and the impulse is allowed to pass without being acted upon. Silence supports this restraint, preventing the moment from escalating into something unnecessary. The Stoic holds the standard even when no one is watching. This consistency strengthens discipline at its foundation. The impulse to react is rooted deeply, shaped by earlier stages of human development where quick response meant survival. That impulse remains active, even when it no longer serves its original purpose, appearing in situations where it is no longer needed. The Stoic recognizes this pattern and does not allow it to operate without examination. Instead of reacting automatically, the impulse is observed, its presence acknowledged, without granting it authority. Silence creates the distance needed to see the impulse clearly, separating it from action. This separation allows the mind to remain steady, even when the body prepares to react. The Stoic understands that awareness weakens the influence of impulse over time. Each moment of restraint reduces its hold and strengthens control. There is a discipline in maintaining composure during moments that feel trivial, because trivial moments occur more frequently than significant ones. The Stoic holds the same standard in both, recognizing that consistency builds strength. A dropped object, a delayed connection, an unexpected interruption, these moments test the same qualities that larger challenges do. The Stoic does not allow irritation to alter tone, posture, or expression, maintaining control without exception. Silence becomes the tool that holds this control in place, preventing small reactions from gaining momentum. The mind remains steady, and the moment passes without disruption. This steadiness becomes a habit, formed through repetition and awareness. Over time, the reaction itself begins to lose its intensity. The process of internal examination begins when the Stoic turns attention inward, observing not only the situation, but the response to it. The mind becomes the object of study, and each thought is examined before it is accepted. This examination is guided by the understanding expressed clearly when Marcus Aurelius reflects. Whenever you are about to find fault with someone, ask yourself the following question: What fault of mine most nearly resembles the one I am about to criticize? This reflection shifts attention away from external judgment and toward internal awareness. The Stoic pauses before assigning blame, considering the possibility of shared patterns and common tendencies. Silence supports this reflection, allowing the question to be held without immediate conclusion. The mind becomes more honest, more aware of its own tendencies. This honesty refines perception. As this awareness deepens, the Stoic begins to see how quickly the mind assigns meaning to events without full understanding. A delay becomes an inconvenience, an interruption becomes a problem, and a mistake becomes a source of frustration. These interpretations form rapidly, often without being noticed, shaping the emotional response that follows. The Stoic slows this process down, observing the formation of thought as it happens. Silence creates the space where these thoughts can be seen clearly before they take control. The mind becomes less automatic and more deliberate. Each interpretation is examined rather than accepted. This examination reduces unnecessary reaction and increases clarity. There is a recognition that something within the mind is capable of observing these processes without being controlled by them. This recognition is captured in the reflection from Marcus Aurelius. Understand at last that you have something in you more powerful and divine than what causes the bodily passions and pulls you like a mere puppet. What thoughts now occupy my mind? Is it not fear, suspicion, desire, or something like that? The Stoic holds this awareness during moments of rising emotion, recognizing that the feeling is not the entirety of the self. Silence supports this awareness, allowing the observing mind to remain present without being overwhelmed. The Stoic watches the thoughts as they arise, identifying their nature without being absorbed by them. This creates a separation between the self and the reaction. In that separation, control becomes possible. Emotional restraint is strengthened when the Stoic begins to anticipate the challenges that will arise throughout the day. There is no expectation that every moment will be smooth or predictable, and this removes the element of surprise that often triggers reaction. The Stoic prepares the mind with clarity, guided by the reflection from Marcus Aurelius. Begin each day by telling yourself, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to the offender's ignorance of what is good or evil." This preparation creates a foundation of understanding before the moment arrives. Silence allows this understanding to settle deeply, forming a steady expectation rather than a reactive surprise. The mind remains composed when these situations occur. The Stoic meets them with awareness rather than resistance. As awareness continues to develop, the Stoic becomes more sensitive to the early signs of emotional movement. A slight tension in the body, a shift in breathing, a change in thought pattern, these signals appear before full reaction takes hold. The Stoic observes these signals carefully, using them as indicators rather than triggers. Silence allows these signals to be noticed without interruption, giving the mind time to respond with control. The reaction is slowed before it fully forms, reducing its intensity. The Stoic remains present, attentive to the internal state without becoming entangled in it. This attentiveness strengthens the connection between awareness and action. The mind becomes more responsive to its own signals. There is also a refinement in how the Stoic relates to discomfort, understanding that discomfort does not require immediate resolution. The feeling is allowed to exist without being pushed away or expressed outwardly. Silence creates a container where the feeling can be experienced without escalation. The Stoic does not rush to remove discomfort, recognizing that observation transforms its impact. The mind remains steady, and the body follows this steadiness. Over time, the intensity of discomfort decreases when it is not reinforced by reaction. The Stoic develops a tolerance for these moments, strengthening resilience. This resilience supports consistent composure. The discipline of awareness extends beyond isolated moments and begins to shape the overall condition of the mind. The Stoic becomes less reactive, less influenced by external fluctuations, and more anchored in internal clarity. Each moment of observation contributes to this stability, reinforcing the habit of restraint. Silence remains a constant presence within this process, supporting awareness without needing to be recognized. The Stoic carries this awareness into every interaction, maintaining consistency across different situations. The mind remains clear, even as circumstances change. This clarity becomes a defining characteristic. There is a quiet transformation that occurs when awareness is practiced consistently, one that shifts the relationship between thought, feeling, and action. The Stoic no longer feels compelled to act on every impulse, because each impulse is seen clearly before it is expressed. Silence allows this clarity to remain intact, preventing the moment from being disrupted by unnecessary reaction. The mind becomes more disciplined, more controlled, and more capable of maintaining composure under pressure. This transformation is gradual, built through repeated moments of observation. The Stoic continues to refine this process, strengthening awareness with each experience. The result is a steady and reliable mind. The Stoic understands that emotional restraint is not achieved through force, but through understanding, and that understanding comes from observation. Each moment provides information about the condition of the mind, revealing patterns that can be refined over time. Silence supports this refinement by creating space for observation to occur without interference. The Stoic remains attentive, watching how thoughts and feelings move through awareness. This attentiveness strengthens control, allowing the mind to respond with clarity rather than impulse. The process continues without interruption, shaping behavior in subtle and consistent ways. The mind remains steady, attentive, and aware. Control begins to deepen when the Stoic understands that not every event requires a reaction, and not every thought requires agreement. There is a quiet recognition that the mind does not need to engage with everything that passes through it. The moment slows, and the urge to respond begins to lose its authority. Silence creates a distance between what happens and what is felt, allowing the Stoic to remain steady while circumstances continue to shift. This distance is not indifference, it is clarity held without disturbance. The mind settles into a state where observation continues without interruption. In that stillness, control becomes natural rather than forced. Many disturbances arise from the belief that every situation demands a response, that every inconvenience must be evaluated, judged, and reacted to. The Stoic sees this pattern clearly and steps outside of it. The mind no longer rushes to assign meaning to every event, allowing some things to pass without engagement. This restraint reduces the number of internal conflicts that would otherwise accumulate throughout the day. Silence becomes the space where these events dissolve without leaving residue. The Stoic does not carry unnecessary impressions forward, allowing the mind to remain light and focused. Control is maintained by choosing what deserves attention. This choice becomes more refined with practice. There is a point where the Stoic recognizes that opinions themselves can become a source of disturbance when they are formed too quickly. The need to judge, to categorize, and to react to every situation creates unnecessary tension. In this awareness, the Stoic begins to hold back from immediate judgment, allowing the situation to exist without being defined. This restraint aligns with the clarity expressed by Marcus Aurelius. You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never any need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control. These things are not asking to be judged by you. Leave them alone. The Stoic allows this understanding to settle, reducing the impulse to engage unnecessarily. Silence reinforces this restraint by removing the pressure to respond. The mind becomes more selective, engaging only where it is useful. As this detachment strengthens, the Stoic begins to see how often emotional disturbance is tied to the attempt to control what cannot be controlled. External events continue to move according to their own nature, unaffected by internal resistance. The Stoic observes this movement without attempting to alter it through reaction. Silence becomes a form of acceptance, holding the moment without struggle. The mind remains steady, allowing events to pass without interference. This steadiness reduces the friction that often accompanies resistance. Control is maintained internally while the external remains unchanged. There is also a shift in how the Stoic relates to circumstances, understanding that they do not possess the power to create anger on their own. The reaction is formed within, shaped by interpretation and expectation. This understanding becomes clear in the reflection from Marcus Aurelius. You shouldn't give circumstances the power to rouse anger, for they don't care at all. The Stoic sees that circumstances are neutral, moving without intention toward or against the self. Silence allows this recognition to remain present, preventing the mind from projecting meaning onto neutral events. The reaction is withheld, and the situation loses its ability to disturb. Control remains intact because it is not given away. The practice of detachment does not remove engagement with life. It refines it, allowing the Stoic to participate without becoming entangled. The mind remains present, observing and understanding, without being pulled into unnecessary reaction. Silence supports this presence by creating a stable environment where observation can continue without interruption. The Stoic moves through situations with clarity, responding when necessary and remaining still when it is not. This balance reduces internal conflict and increases effectiveness. Each moment is approached with awareness rather than urgency. Control becomes consistent across different circumstances. There is a calm that develops when the Stoic no longer feels the need to resist every discomfort. The mind begins to accept the presence of difficulty without attempting to eliminate it immediately. Silence creates a space where discomfort can exist without escalating into frustration. The Stoic remains steady, observing the feeling without being absorbed by it. Over time, the intensity of discomfort decreases when it is not reinforced by reaction. This reduction strengthens resilience and supports continued composure. The mind becomes more adaptable, less affected by external variation. Control deepens through acceptance. The Stoic also learns to receive events without attachment, allowing them to arrive and pass without leaving a lasting imprint. This approach is captured in the reflection from Marcus Aurelius: receive without conceit, release without struggle. The Stoic applies this principle to both positive and negative experiences, maintaining balance regardless of the nature of the event. Silence supports this balance by preventing overreaction in either direction. The mind remains steady, neither elevated nor diminished by circumstance. Each experience is held briefly and then released. This process maintains clarity and prevents accumulation of unnecessary tension. As detachment becomes more refined, the Stoic begins to notice how much energy is conserved by not reacting to every event. The mind remains focused, free from the constant fluctuations that come with reactive behavior. Silence becomes a form of conservation, preserving attention and clarity for what truly matters. The Stoic directs energy with intention, avoiding unnecessary expenditure on trivial disturbances. This focused approach increases effectiveness and reduces fatigue. The mind operates with greater efficiency. Control is maintained through selective engagement. There is also a recognition that many reactions are driven by expectation, and when expectations are loosened, reactions diminish. The Stoic approaches each moment without rigid demands, allowing events to unfold without resistance. Silence supports this openness, creating space for observation rather than judgment. The mind remains flexible, adapting to what occurs without losing balance. This flexibility strengthens composure and reduces frustration. The Stoic moves with the moment rather than against it. Control is maintained through alignment rather than opposition. The practice of detachment also refines how the Stoic responds when action is required. Response becomes deliberate, guided by clarity rather than impulse. Silence precedes action, ensuring that it is formed with understanding. The Stoic does not rush, allowing the moment to reveal the appropriate course. This measured approach increases the effectiveness of each response. The mind remains steady, and the action reflects this steadiness. Control is expressed through precision. The Stoic remains composed throughout the process. Over time, this discipline reshapes the relationship between the Stoic and the external world, reducing the influence of circumstances on internal state. The mind becomes less reactive, less dependent on favorable conditions to maintain balance. Silence supports this independence by providing a constant foundation regardless of external change. The Stoic remains centered, observing rather than reacting. This consistency strengthens resilience. The mind becomes reliable in its response. Control is maintained across all situations. There is a quiet confidence that emerges from this detachment, one that does not depend on control of external outcomes. The Stoic trusts in the ability to remain steady regardless of circumstance. Silence reinforces this confidence by reducing the need for constant validation. The mind remains focused inward, maintaining clarity and composure. This confidence shapes behavior in subtle ways, influencing how interactions unfold. The Stoic does not need to assert control because it is already present. Control becomes a state rather than an action. As this practice continues, the Stoic becomes more attuned to the distinction between what can be influenced and what must be accepted. This distinction guides decision-making, ensuring that energy is directed appropriately. Silence supports this discernment, allowing the mind to evaluate without pressure. The Stoic remains patient, allowing clarity to emerge before acting. This patience reduces error and increases effectiveness. The mind becomes more precise in its judgments. Control is strengthened through understanding. The discipline of detachment and control continues to refine itself through repetition, shaping the Stoic into someone who remains steady under pressure and clear in the face of uncertainty. Silence remains the foundation of this discipline, supporting every moment of awareness and restraint. The Stoic continues to observe, to release, and to remain composed, allowing the mind to operate without unnecessary disturbance. Each moment reinforces the pattern, strengthening control and deepening clarity. The process continues without interruption, shaping behavior and perception in a consistent and deliberate way. Calm does not arrive by accident, and it does not remain without discipline. It is built slowly through repeated moments where reaction is held back and awareness is allowed to lead. The Stoic understands that strength is not displayed through intensity, nor through force, nor through visible dominance, but through the ability to remain steady when the environment begins to shift. There is a quiet firmness in a composed mind that does not need to assert itself loudly, and this firmness becomes more visible the longer it is maintained. Silence plays a central role in this stability, holding the mind in place while external pressures attempt to create movement. The Stoic does not follow that movement, remaining grounded while others are carried by it. This grounded state is not rigid. It is controlled, adaptable, and aware. It is within this state that strength becomes unmistakable. Many equate strength with outward expression, with raised voices, with visible intensity, with the appearance of control over others. The Stoic observes these expressions carefully and recognizes that they often reveal the opposite of what they attempt to show. A loss of composure signals a loss of control, and that signal is immediate and difficult to conceal. The Stoic avoids this loss by maintaining calm even when provoked, even when challenged, even when pressure is applied repeatedly. Silence supports this restraint, preventing escalation from taking hold within the mind. The body remains still, the tone remains steady, and the presence remains unchanged. This consistency becomes a form of communication that does not rely on words. It reveals control through absence of reaction. There is a deeper understanding that calm is not weakness, and that restraint is not submission, but an expression of control that is difficult to replicate without discipline. This understanding is reflected clearly in the words of Marcus Aurelius. It isn't manly to be enraged. Rather, gentleness and civility are more human, and therefore manlier. The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. The Stoic holds this principle internally, using it as a measure of conduct in moments where anger begins to rise. Silence allows this principle to guide action without interference, keeping the mind aligned with its standard. The reaction is observed but not acted upon, and in that restraint, strength is reinforced. The Stoic remains composed, allowing calm to define the moment. This calm carries its own weight. The presence of calm creates a different kind of influence, one that does not rely on persuasion or force to shape outcomes. When others escalate, their movements become predictable, and their responses begin to lose clarity. The Stoic does not match this escalation, choosing instead to remain steady and observant. Silence holds the interaction in place, preventing it from becoming chaotic. The contrast between calm and agitation becomes visible, and this contrast shifts the dynamic of the exchange. The Stoic does not need to assert authority because it becomes apparent through behavior. The moment begins to stabilize around that presence. Calm becomes the center of the interaction. There are situations where anger attempts to assert itself quickly, rising from a perceived injustice, a misunderstanding, or a repeated irritation. The Stoic feels this movement clearly, yet does not allow it to define the response. Instead, the feeling is observed as it forms, and its intensity is allowed to diminish without reinforcement. Silence acts as a barrier, preventing the feeling from translating into speech or action. The Stoic remains aware, watching the rise and fall of emotion without becoming entangled in it. Over time, this observation reduces the strength of the reaction. The mind becomes less responsive to provocation. Calm becomes more accessible in every situation. The ability to remain silent in the face of anger is a form of strength that often goes unnoticed, yet it shapes the outcome of interactions in subtle ways. The The Stoic understands that silence is not an absence of response, but a deliberate choice that influences the direction of the moment. This is reflected in the clarity of Marcus Aurelius when he states, "The best answer to anger is silence." The Stoic holds this understanding in practice, allowing silence to resolve what words would only prolong. The moment loses momentum when it is not fed by reaction. The interaction becomes less intense, less chaotic, and more manageable. Silence reduces conflict without needing to confront it directly. There is also a discipline in maintaining calm over extended periods, especially when pressure is continuous rather than isolated. The Stoic does not treat calm as something to be used occasionally, but as a constant state that must be preserved. This requires awareness of subtle shifts in emotion and a commitment to maintaining balance even when discomfort persists. Silence supports this consistency by preventing small reactions from accumulating into larger disturbances. Each moment is approached with the same level of attention and control. The Stoic remains steady regardless of the duration of the challenge. This steadiness builds resilience over time. As calm becomes more consistent, the Stoic begins to notice how it affects others, often without direct intention. Agitation tends to lose its intensity when it is not met with resistance, and the absence of reaction creates a space where tension begins to dissolve. The Stoic does not seek to control others, yet the presence of calm influences the interaction naturally. Silence allows this influence to take place without interference. The moment shifts without force, guided by stability rather than confrontation. The Stoic remains centered, allowing the interaction to adjust around that center. This influence is subtle, yet effective. There is a refinement in how the Stoic carries themselves during moments of tension, where every movement, every expression, and every pause reflects internal control. The body remains composed, the breath remains steady, and the gaze remains clear. These details communicate stability without requiring explanation. Silence enhances this communication by removing distractions that would otherwise weaken the message. The Stoic does not need to explain their calm because it is visible in every aspect of their presence. This visibility reinforces the strength behind it. Calm becomes a defining characteristic rather than a temporary state. The discipline of calm also extends into internal dialogue, where thoughts are observed and guided without allowing them to escalate into agitation. The Stoic watches how the mind attempts to justify anger, to create narratives that support reaction, and chooses not to follow these narratives. Silence within the mind becomes as important as silence in speech, creating a stable environment for thought. The mind remains clear, free from unnecessary conflict. This clarity supports better decision-making and more precise action. The Stoic maintains control over both internal and external responses. Calm is preserved at every level. Over time, this practice reshapes how the Stoic experiences conflict, reducing its intensity and altering its impact. Situations that once triggered strong reactions begin to lose their effect, as the mind no longer responds automatically. Silence remains present throughout this transformation, supporting each moment of restraint. The Stoic becomes less affected by external fluctuations, maintaining a consistent internal state. This consistency strengthens confidence and reduces uncertainty. The mind becomes more reliable, less influenced by temporary conditions. Calm becomes a stable foundation. There is also an understanding that calm allows for clearer perception, as the absence of agitation removes distortion from the moment. The Stoic sees situations more accurately when the mind is not clouded by emotion. Silence supports this clarity by maintaining a steady environment for observation. The Stoic remains attentive, noticing details that would otherwise be overlooked. This attentiveness improves judgment and increases effectiveness. The response, when it comes, is shaped by clarity rather than reaction. Calm enhances both perception and action. The Stoic continues to refine this discipline through repetition, strengthening the connection between awareness and control. Each moment of calm reinforces the next, creating a pattern that becomes more stable over time. Silence remains at the center of this process, supporting every instance of restraint. The Stoic does not rely on occasional control, but on consistent practice that shapes behavior at every level. The mind remains steady, the body remains composed, and the interaction remains clear. This consistency builds a form of strength that is quiet yet undeniable. Calm becomes the natural response. As this state deepens, the Stoic moves through situations with a sense of ease that does not depend on external conditions. The mind remains balanced regardless of what arises, maintaining clarity and control without effort. Silence supports this ease by removing unnecessary tension from the moment. The Stoic does not seek to control everything, but maintains control over what matters. This distinction strengthens confidence and reduces internal conflict. The presence remains steady, and the moment remains clear. Calm continues to guide behavior naturally. There is a quiet continuity in this discipline, where each moment of calm connects to the next, forming a stable and consistent pattern of behavior. The Stoic remains attentive, aware of both internal and external movement, and maintains control without strain. Silence continues to support this awareness, allowing observation to remain uninterrupted. The mind remains focused, steady and clear, prepared to respond with precision when necessary. Calm remains present, shaping the interaction without needing to assert itself. The moment continues to unfold with clarity and control. Chapter 5. The authority of measured speech. Speech reveals the condition of the mind, and when it is used without restraint, it exposes more than it intends to communicate. The Stoic understands this and does not rush to speak, allowing silence to establish presence before any word is formed. There is a weight that builds in that silence, a quiet authority that prepares the moment for clarity rather than noise. The urge to fill space begins to lose its influence when it is observed instead of followed. The Stoic stands within that stillness, letting the environment settle without interference. Words are no longer used to compete for attention, but to bring precision into the moment when it is required. This is where speech begins to take on a different quality, shaped by restraint and guided by awareness. Many speak to relieve tension, to reduce uncertainty, or to assert presence, yet this pattern often weakens the impact of what is said. The Stoic does not rely on speech to create presence, because presence is already established through composure. Silence allows the mind to remain clear, preventing unnecessary expression from disrupting that clarity. The moment is allowed to develop fully, revealing what is needed before any response is given. The Stoic observes, gathers, and refines understanding before allowing words to emerge. This process transforms speech into something deliberate rather than reactive. The mind becomes steady, and the words reflect that steadiness. Speech becomes an extension of control rather than a release of impulse. There is a discipline in holding words back until they are fully formed, and this discipline requires patience and awareness. The Stoic does not rush to respond, recognizing that early responses often lack clarity. Silence becomes the space where thoughts are shaped, examined, and refined before they are expressed. This refinement ensures that when speech occurs, it carries meaning without excess. The Stoic understands that fewer words, when chosen carefully, often communicate more effectively than extended explanation. The moment is not lost by waiting, it is clarified. Words gain weight through restraint. The mind remains focused on precision rather than speed. The standard for speech is not based on frequency, but on value, and this standard becomes clear when the Stoic reflects on the principle expressed by Marcus Aurelius: "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This statement establishes a clear boundary for expression, guiding the Stoic to filter words before they are spoken. Silence supports this filtering process, allowing the mind to evaluate whether a thought meets the standard of truth and necessity. The Stoic does not speak to satisfy impulse, but to align with clarity and integrity. This alignment strengthens the impact of each word. Speech becomes consistent with understanding. The mind remains disciplined in its expression. There is also an awareness that excessive speech dilutes meaning, spreading attention across too many words and reducing the clarity of each. The Stoic avoids this dilution by maintaining restraint, allowing silence to carry what words do not need to express. This approach aligns with the understanding that it is better to say a few words which are useful than many which are useless, as Musonius Rufus observed with precision. The Stoic applies this principle by selecting only what is necessary, leaving the rest unspoken. Silence becomes a companion to speech, reinforcing its clarity by contrast. The moment remains focused, free from unnecessary expansion. Words remain sharp and direct. There is a refinement that occurs when the Stoic begins to measure speech not only by content, but by timing. Words delivered too early often lose their relevance, while words delivered at the right moment carry greater impact. Silence allows the Stoic to wait for that moment, ensuring that speech aligns with the situation fully. The mind remains attentive, observing when clarity has settled enough to support expression. This patience transforms communication into something precise and effective. The Stoic does not rush, allowing the moment to guide the response. Words are placed carefully within that moment. The result is a form of speech that is both controlled and influential. The discipline of restraint extends into how the Stoic listens, understanding that listening shapes the quality of speech that follows. By observing fully, the Stoic gathers the information needed to respond with accuracy. Silence supports this process by preventing interruption and maintaining focus. The mind remains engaged with what is being said, rather than preparing a response prematurely. This attentiveness improves understanding and reduces misinterpretation. The Stoic responds from clarity rather than assumption. Speech becomes a continuation of listening rather than a disruption of it. There is also a control in how the Stoic delivers words, ensuring that tone, pace, and expression remain consistent with clarity. Speech is not rushed, not raised unnecessarily, and not used to overpower others. The Stoic maintains composure, allowing words to stand without strain. Silence reinforces this composure by preventing escalation. The interaction remains steady, guided by control rather than intensity. This steadiness becomes visible, influencing how others perceive and respond. The Stoic communicates without losing balance. Speech remains aligned with internal control. When the Stoic chooses to speak, it is done with intention, and this intention is shaped during the period of silence that precedes it. The mind has had time to examine the situation, to refine the thought, and to align the response with understanding. This preparation ensures that speech is effective without being excessive. Silence creates the conditions for this preparation, allowing clarity to develop fully. The The Stoic does not need to correct or repeat unnecessarily because the initial expression is precise. Words carry their meaning without dilution. The moment remains focused. Communication becomes efficient and clear. There is a principle of restraint that guides when speech is withheld entirely, recognizing that some moments require silence more than words. The Stoic evaluates whether speech will improve the situation or simply add to it. If clarity is not increased, silence is maintained. This evaluation aligns with the standard reflected in the conduct of Cato the Younger, who expressed, "I begin to speak only when I am certain what I will say is not better left unsaid." The Stoic applies this standard internally, ensuring that speech serves a purpose. Silence remains the default, and speech becomes the exception. This approach preserves the weight of communication. Over time, this discipline reshapes how the Stoic experiences conversation, reducing unnecessary speech and increasing the impact of what is said. Silence becomes more comfortable, and the need to fill space diminishes. The mind remains steady, and the interaction becomes more focused. The Stoic does not seek to dominate conversation, but to contribute with clarity when necessary. This shift changes the dynamic of communication, making it more deliberate and less reactive. Words are used with intention, and silence supports that intention continuously. The balance between the two becomes refined. There is also a recognition that measured speech reduces conflict, as it removes the excess that often leads to misunderstanding. The Stoic communicates clearly, avoiding ambiguity that could create confusion. Silence allows for careful consideration of how words will be received. The mind remains aware of the impact of expression, guiding speech toward clarity. This awareness improves the quality of interaction. The Stoic remains composed, allowing communication to remain controlled. Words serve their purpose without creating additional tension. As this practice continues, the Stoic develops a presence that is shaped as much by silence as by speech. Others begin to recognize the difference, noticing the weight behind each word and the steadiness behind each pause. This presence does not demand attention, yet it holds it naturally. Silence becomes a defining element of this presence, reinforcing the authority behind it. The Stoic does not need to assert influence because it is already present in the way communication is handled. Speech becomes a reflection of internal discipline. The interaction remains balanced and controlled. The discipline of measured speech continues to refine itself through repetition, strengthening the connection between thought, silence, and expression. Each moment of restraint reinforces the next, building consistency over time. The Stoic remains attentive, ensuring that speech remains aligned with clarity and purpose. Silence supports this alignment by providing the space needed for awareness to remain active. The mind becomes more precise, more controlled, and more effective in its communication. Words are used carefully, and silence remains a constant presence. The process continues, shaping behavior in subtle ways. There is a quiet continuity in this discipline, where each word is connected to the silence that surrounds it, and each pause carries its own meaning. The Stoic remains aware of this continuity, maintaining control over both speech and silence. The interaction unfolds with clarity, guided by intention rather than impulse. The mind remains steady and the moment remains focused. Speech and silence work together, reinforcing each other without conflict. The Stoic continues to move through conversations with precision, maintaining balance and control within each exchange. Listening is often treated as a pause between speaking, yet for the Stoic, it becomes the primary movement of awareness. a steady attention that gathers meaning without the urgency to respond. The moment expands when the mind is not rushing ahead to prepare its reply, and within that expansion, details begin to surface with clarity. Tone, rhythm, hesitation, and intention reveal themselves gradually, and these layers are only visible when silence holds the space long enough for them to appear. The Stoic remains present within that space, allowing the words of others to complete themselves fully before forming any response. This presence is not passive, it is active and disciplined, guided by control over impulse. Silence becomes the structure that supports this discipline, keeping attention anchored and undisturbed. In this way, listening becomes a form of strength that shapes everything that follows. There is a tendency within the mind to agree or reject too quickly, to decide before understanding has had time to settle. The Stoic recognizes this tendency and slows it down deliberately, allowing thoughts to be received without immediate acceptance. This restraint opens a space where ideas can be examined without distortion, and within that space, understanding becomes more precise. The mind becomes capable of holding complexity without forcing resolution, and this capacity strengthens clarity. It is in this state that the insight from Aristotle becomes practical and immediate. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. The Stoic holds this standard internally, allowing thoughts to pass through awareness without being claimed or dismissed too quickly. Silence supports this process, maintaining the distance needed for clear examination. The result is a mind that remains steady in the presence of differing ideas. As listening deepens, the Stoic begins to notice how often people reveal more through what is unintended than through what is deliberate. Words carry layers that extend beyond their surface meaning, and these layers become visible when attention is sustained. The Stoic observes inconsistencies, patterns, and shifts that indicate deeper currents beneath the conversation. This observation requires patience, and patience is supported by silence that does not interrupt the flow. The moment is allowed to unfold fully, revealing information that cannot be accessed through interruption. The Stoic remains still, allowing understanding to develop without interference. This approach gathers more truth with less effort. Listening becomes a tool of precision. There is also an awareness that valuable insight can emerge even from imperfect sources, and this awareness prevents the Stoic from dismissing information prematurely. The quality of the speaker does not always determine the value of what is said, and recognizing this expands the field of observation. The Stoic remains open, extracting meaning where it exists, and allowing the rest to pass without disturbance. This approach aligns with the reflection from Plutarch, "Know how to listen, and you will profit even from those who talk badly." The Stoic applies this by maintaining attention regardless of the source, separating useful information from unnecessary noise. Silence supports this separation by preventing reactive judgment. The mind remains clear and receptive. Understanding becomes more comprehensive. Listening also refines how the Stoic responds, because response is shaped by what has been fully understood rather than what has been assumed. The Stoic does not interrupt the flow of conversation, allowing each point to reach completion before engaging. This creates a rhythm where understanding leads and speech follows, maintaining balance within the interaction. Silence becomes a bridge between hearing and speaking, ensuring that nothing is rushed or forced. The mind remains aligned with the moment, and the response reflects this alignment. Words emerge with clarity, supported by the depth of observation that precedes them. Communication becomes more effective and less reactive. The interaction remains controlled and steady. There is a discipline in giving attention without immediately offering voice, a discipline that strengthens presence and reduces unnecessary expression. The Stoic understands that attention itself carries influence and that listening can shape the direction of conversation without needing to assert control. This understanding is reflected in the line from William Shakespeare, "Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice." The Stoic holds this principle in practice, allowing attention to be extended widely while speech remains selective. Silence becomes the measure that determines when expression is necessary. The balance between listening and speaking becomes more refined. Presence is established without excess. As this discipline continues, the Stoic becomes more attuned to the subtle shifts within conversation, noticing how attention affects the behavior of others. When someone is fully heard, their tone often changes, their pace adjusts, and their expression becomes more measured. The Stoic observes these shifts without attempting to control them, allowing the interaction to evolve naturally. Silence creates the environment where this evolution can occur without interference. The moment becomes more stable, and the exchange becomes more meaningful. The Stoic remains grounded, allowing listening to guide the interaction. This guidance is quiet, yet effective. There is also a refinement in how the Stoic processes what is heard, separating immediate reaction from thoughtful consideration. The mind becomes less reactive, allowing information to settle before forming a response. This delay improves the quality of understanding and reduces the likelihood of misinterpretation. Silence supports this delay, providing the space needed for thought to develop fully. The Stoic remains patient, allowing clarity to emerge rather than forcing it. This patience strengthens intellectual control. The mind becomes more precise and less impulsive. The practice of listening extends inward as well, where the Stoic observes internal dialogue with the same level of attention. Thoughts arise in response to what is heard, and these thoughts are examined before being expressed. The Stoic listens to the mind as carefully as to others, ensuring that internal responses align with clarity. Silence supports this inward listening, creating a stable environment for reflection. The mind becomes more disciplined, less influenced by immediate reaction. This discipline shapes both internal and external communication. Control becomes consistent across both domains. There is a recognition that listening without interruption allows others to reveal their position fully, often clarifying the situation without the need for correction. The Stoic trusts this process, allowing the conversation to unfold without interference. Silence acts as a mirror, reflecting what is said without distortion. This reflection often leads to greater clarity than direct intervention. The Stoic remains attentive, observing how understanding develops naturally. The interaction becomes less confrontational and more informative. Listening guides the exchange toward resolution. Over time, this discipline reshapes how the Stoic engages with conversation, reducing the need for constant participation and increasing the value of each contribution. Silence becomes more comfortable, and the need to assert presence through speech diminishes. The Stoic remains engaged without being intrusive, allowing attention to carry influence. This approach changes the dynamic of interaction, making it more balanced and less reactive. Words are used sparingly, and listening becomes the primary mode of engagement. The mind remains steady, and the interaction remains clear. There is also an awareness that intellectual control requires the ability to hold conflicting ideas without becoming unsettled. The Stoic allows different perspectives to exist within awareness without forcing immediate resolution. This capacity strengthens clarity and reduces emotional disturbance. Silence supports this capacity by maintaining space for multiple viewpoints. The mind remains open, yet grounded, capable of navigating complexity without losing stability. This stability enhances judgment and improves communication. The Stoic remains composed in the presence of difference. As listening becomes more refined, the Stoic develops a deeper understanding of how attention shapes perception. What is focused on becomes more visible, and what is ignored fades into the background. The Stoic directs attention deliberately, ensuring that it remains aligned with clarity rather than distraction. Silence supports this direction by removing unnecessary noise. The mind remains focused, gathering information with precision. This focus improves the quality of observation. Listening becomes an active process of selection and refinement. The discipline of listening continues to strengthen through repetition, shaping the Stoic into someone who remains attentive, patient, and controlled in every interaction. Silence remains at the center of this discipline, supporting awareness without interruption. The Stoic continues to observe, to process, and to respond with clarity when necessary. Each moment reinforces the pattern, strengthening intellectual control and refining communication. The mind remains steady, and the interaction remains clear. Listening becomes a form of quiet authority that guides the exchange without force. Authority does not announce itself with volume, and it does not need to compete for space to be felt. It settles into the room through composure and remains there without effort. The Stoic understands that presence is established before any word is spoken, and that silence prepares the ground where influence can take root. When the mind is steady, the body reflects that steadiness, and the environment begins to organize itself around it. There is no rush to assert, no pressure to persuade, only a quiet certainty that holds its position. Silence becomes the frame that contains this certainty, giving it shape without drawing attention to it. Others sense this stability, even if they cannot name it. Influence begins here, formed before speech enters the moment. Conversation often becomes crowded with unnecessary words, and in that crowd meaning becomes diluted and direction becomes unclear. The Stoic removes this excess by allowing silence to remain present, creating space where understanding can form without interference. This restraint reveals the principle that has guided thinkers for centuries, captured in the observation that silence is one of the great arts of conversation, as Cicero expressed with precision. The Stoic applies this not as an idea, but as a practice, allowing silence to carry part of the exchange. Each pause holds weight. Each moment of stillness adds clarity. The conversation becomes more deliberate, less reactive, and more focused. Influence grows within that focus. The Stoic does not need to speak often to be heard clearly. There is a shift that occurs when silence is no longer seen as absence, but as a form of communication that shapes perception. The Stoic uses silence to guide the pace of interaction, slowing it when it becomes rushed and stabilizing it when it begins to fragment. This guidance is subtle, yet it changes how others respond. The absence of immediate reaction invites reflection, and reflection reduces impulsive behavior. The Stoic remains present, allowing the moment to adjust naturally. Silence becomes a tool that directs without forcing. The interaction becomes more balanced. Authority is established without declaration. Words, when they arrive, carry the imprint of the silence that precedes them, and this imprint gives them weight that cannot be manufactured through repetition or intensity. The Stoic allows this weight to build, ensuring that speech emerges from clarity rather than impulse. There is no need to explain excessively, because the words are supported by presence. The moment receives them without resistance, and their meaning remains intact. Silence surrounds the words, preventing them from being diluted by unnecessary additions. The Stoic speaks with intention, and the intention is felt immediately. Influence becomes precise. The exchange remains controlled. There is a form of authority that does not depend on external recognition, and it is strengthened by restraint rather than display. The Stoic embodies this authority through consistent composure, allowing behavior to communicate more than words. This is reflected in the insight from Leonardo da Vinci: nothing strengthens authority so much as silence. The Stoic holds this understanding in practice, allowing silence to reinforce presence continuously. The need to assert diminishes because authority is already established. Others begin to respond differently, adjusting their tone and pace without being instructed. The interaction aligns with the calm that is present. Influence operates without force. As this discipline deepens, the Stoic becomes aware of how speech can shape direction when it is used with precision. Words are no longer scattered across the moment. They are placed carefully where they can have the greatest effect. This placement is guided by awareness, supported by silence, and refined through restraint. The Stoic does not attempt to control outcomes through excessive explanation, but guides them through clarity. Each statement serves a purpose, and that purpose is understood before it is expressed. Silence ensures that only what is necessary is spoken. The result is communication that is efficient and impactful. Authority becomes consistent. There is also a recognition that influence does not require agreement to be effective. It requires clarity and consistency over time. The Stoic does not seek to convince through force, but to present with steadiness. This steadiness allows others to consider without resistance, creating space for understanding to develop naturally. Silence supports this process by removing pressure from the interaction. The moment becomes less confrontational and more reflective. The Stoic remains composed, allowing influence to take shape gradually. The exchange becomes more meaningful. Authority is sustained through patience. The presence of silence also changes how attention is directed, drawing focus to what is essential and removing distraction from what is not. The Stoic uses this shift to guide conversation toward clarity, allowing unnecessary elements to fade. The mind remains attentive, observing how attention moves and adjusting without force. Silence creates the conditions where focus can be maintained. The interaction becomes more structured, even without explicit direction. The Stoic remains centered within this structure. Influence is maintained through consistency. The moment remains clear. There is a discipline in allowing others to speak fully, knowing that interruption often weakens understanding and creates unnecessary resistance. The Stoic holds space for expression, allowing the conversation to unfold without disruption. Silence supports this by maintaining openness within the exchange. When speech is finally used, it arrives at a point where it can be received fully. The Stoic does not need to repeat or reinforce unnecessarily because the timing is aligned with the moment. Words land with clarity. The interaction remains balanced. Authority is expressed through patience. Speech itself carries power when it is aligned with intention, and this power becomes more evident when it is not diluted by overuse. The Stoic understands the depth of this principle, reflected in the statement from Ralph Waldo Emerson: "Speech is power. Speech is to persuade, to convert, to compel." This power is not exercised through volume or frequency, but through precision and timing. Silence prepares the ground where this power can operate effectively. The Stoic speaks with awareness of this responsibility. Each word carries direction. Influence becomes deliberate. There is a refinement in how the Stoic balances silence and speech, ensuring that neither dominates the interaction unnecessarily. Silence remains the foundation, and speech emerges when it adds value. This balance creates a rhythm that is steady and controlled. The mind remains aware of this rhythm, adjusting naturally as the situation evolves. The Stoic does not force expression, allowing it to arise when it is aligned with clarity. The interaction becomes fluid, guided by awareness rather than impulse. Authority is maintained through this balance. The moment remains stable. Over time, this approach reshapes how others perceive the Stoic, recognizing a presence that is consistent and composed. Words are expected to carry meaning, and silence is understood to be intentional. This expectation changes how interactions unfold, creating a different dynamic where clarity is prioritized. The Stoic does not need to establish this dynamic through explanation. It emerges through behavior. Silence supports this emergence continuously. The interaction becomes more focused. Influence is sustained without effort. There is also a recognition that authority is not static. It is maintained through continuous discipline and awareness. The Stoic remains attentive, ensuring that speech and silence remain aligned with clarity. Each moment is approached with the same level of control, regardless of its intensity. Silence remains present, supporting consistency across all situations. The mind remains steady, and the interaction remains clear. This consistency reinforces authority. The Stoic continues to refine this process with each experience. As this discipline continues, the Stoic becomes more attuned to the impact of presence itself, understanding that influence extends beyond words. The way one stands, listens, pauses, and responds all contribute to the overall effect. Silence enhances each of these elements, allowing them to be perceived without distraction. The Stoic maintains awareness of this, ensuring that presence remains aligned with intention. The interaction becomes more cohesive. Authority is expressed through every aspect of behavior. The moment remains grounded. There is a quiet continuity in this practice, where each moment of silence supports the next, and each word is shaped by the stillness that surrounds it. The Stoic remains aware of this continuity, allowing it to guide interaction naturally. The mind remains steady, the speech remains precise, and the silence remains present. Influence continues to develop without force, shaped by clarity and supported by restraint. The exchange unfolds with control and balance. Authority remains consistent. The moment continues to carry weight.